Everybody's gotten logged in, so we'll go ahead and get started. So, little introduction. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ashley Weinheimer. I'm a customer success librarian for McGraw-Hill's AccessScience platform, which is the sponsor for today's presentation on lessons learned from the 1918 influenza and COVID-19 pandemics with Dr. Terry Shores. Just a quick word on AccessScience. Let me go to my next slide here. AccessScience is an authoritative and dynamic online resource that contains high-quality reference material covering all major scientific disciplines. An award-winning gateway to scientific knowledge, it offers over 10,000 in-depth articles on scientific concepts, briefings and news stories on the latest scientific developments, plus biographies, videos, and exclusive animations. All of the articles on AccessScience are written by expert scientists and engineers, including our guest speaker today, Dr. Terry Shores, who authored our article on coronaviruses, as well as 11 other articles on various virus topics. The coronavirus article is currently available as an open access article on the site, so anyone can head over and check that out. And if you would like more information on AccessScience, you can contact customer success at the email listed on the screen there, and that email and the link to Dr. Shores' article will be included in the follow-up email you'll receive as well. And just a few housekeeping things before I introduce Dr. Shores. The webinar is being recorded, so everyone who registered will receive a link to the recording within 2 days. All of the attendee lines are muted, but you do have the option to use chat or Q&A to communicate with me and Dr. Shores. So please use the Q&A option for any official questions that you'd like me to pass along for our Q&A portion. And then feel free to use the chat box to add any other comments that you'd like to share. So some of my McGraw-Hill colleagues and I will be monitoring both of those, so you can enter questions and comments at any time throughout the discussion. And now I am thrilled to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Terry Shores, who has been a member of the Department of Biology at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh since 1997. Dr. Shores is a devoted teacher and researcher at the primarily undergraduate level and has been a recipient of university awards, including a Distinguished Teaching Award, 2 endowed professorships, and a Distinguished Alumni Award from the Department of Biological Sciences at St. Cloud State University. She has taught a variety of courses and laboratories and has made a strong contribution to the development of new courses in microbiology, virology, and molecular biology. Before teaching at UW-Oshkosh, Dr. Shores was a postdoctoral fellow in the Laboratory of Viral Diseases under the direction of Dr. Bernard Moss in the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases at the National Institutes of Health. While her expertise centered on upon the expression of virus genes, she expanded research into the potential of antiviral compounds in cranberries and other Wisconsin crops. She has mentored many students engaged in independent research projects, including projects on the Ebola outbreak in West Africa and the characterization of a biofilm present on an artisan well in Wisconsin. Dr. Shores' passion lies in microbiology and virology education. In addition to authoring Understanding Viruses 3rd edition, she authored Encounters in Virology and co-authored the Microbial Challenge 3rd edition and AIDS, the Biological Basis 5th edition. Initiative, creativity, humor, networking, using current events, using the latest technology, and leading collaborative, cross-disciplinary studies are the hallmark of Dr. Shores' talents. Thank you so much, Dr. Shores, for being with us today, and I'll let you take it from here.
Anyway, well, thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to give this presentation to you. This has been sort of a surreal year because I've been very familiar with the 1918 influenza pandemic. And let me go on to this next slide here. I'm going to go through a little bit of an outline on what my talk is going to be about and kind of then summarize it. But I just wanted to mention that I arrived at UW-Oshkosh in 1997. And what happened was that year when I came here, a documentary came out by PBS called Influenza and an American Experience. And I was just taken aback by it because I've been trained as a virologist. I was at the NIH. I was where Dr. Anthony Fauci is. And I had never heard of this, horrible pandemic. And, I had virology classes, all of this. And, I saw this in 1997 and I was just taken aback and I was really interested in it. So I thought, I want to find out what happened in the Oshkosh area. And so I ended up doing a study with 3 different classes to figure out what happened in Oshkosh. And this was in 2001. So, I have known about this pandemic for quite some time. And I had always told my students someday, most of them want to go into healthcare. And I said, someday you're going to be at the front lines of some sort of pandemic, whether it's caused by a bacterium, a virus, some other infectious entity. And I never thought that I would still be teaching and saying we are now at the front line. So it was quite interesting and surreal year for me. And I follow epidemics all the time. I teach about them in my classes, and this has been a long haul, but it's I'm right now in my teaching bunker. I've been teaching 100% online for over a year. I have 200 students right now, totally online. So it's been interesting. Anyway, so my quick presentation is I'm going to first go through the 1918 influenza pandemic, just because I'm not sure my audience is real familiar with it. And I won't spend a whole lot of time on it, but I will spend some time on it. And I'll go through everything from, the disease, the statistics, as well as the challenges and lessons that we learned from that. And could we carry forward some of those lessons that we know about today with the COVID-19 pandemic? And I'll do the same thing, the same kind of order with the COVID-19 pandemic. And then lastly, I wanted to bring up some more recent issues we've had, like masking, also about social distancing, the vaccine rollout, some of the problems with vaccine hesitancy, and currently, what is our situation now? Is this pandemic going to ever end? And then I just wanted to mention a little bit about what's going on with India right now. So here we are. The other thing that seemed rather surreal is I did this study in 2001, and it ended up being my virology class, a psychology class. These students actually interviewed influenza survivors. There were still survivors available. If I decided to do this later, that wouldn't have been the case. Most of these were children. They had never talked about the 1918 flu before. Their memories were poignant. I ended up, we had to kind of advertise in the newspaper saying, does anybody have diaries, pictures, journals, so we can learn about what happened in this county. It's actually Winnebago County. And I ended up starting what I called an LOL file, little old lady file, because it turns out that people that were still alive that remember the pandemic were little old ladies. And I got so many nice letters and handwritten letters. Helen Jelinski, I would call her every week and we would talk about what had happened. And we really learned a lot through the survivors. We also had an archaeology class involved where they did a cemetery study. They looked at in times when a lot of people are dying, do they get a tombstone? Are they all the same? So they were able to do an above ground kind of study. And then in virology, we studied more of the statistics, numbers of cases, numbers of deaths. And then I had students draw the name out of a hat. I had gone to the courthouse before this had happened, and I actually created a huge spreadsheet and I wrote down everyone that died, and I had the whole list. And so they drew the name out of a hat and I said, tell me who they were. These are people that had died. And so we tried to personalize it more and learn more about what had happened in Winnebago County. So I was quite familiar with it. And it took several years before I could actually get our study published. But finally, I got our study published in a local journal. It's a clinical medicine and research journal out of Marshfield Clinic. And this study is called A Winnebago County, Wisconsin Perspective. It came out in, I believe, what year is that? 2009. It took me forever to get it published because it was a history research paper, and typically I'm a bench scientist, and there was some issues about I should have been more of a historian. It was complicated, but finally in 2009 it came out. And, I guess as a researcher, you always think, well, maybe 5.5 people will read your research article. And I didn't expect that much would become of it, but I was happy because it was it had become part of Wisconsin's record, that we remembered that this happened in this time frame. And interestingly, as soon as this pandemic started to unfold, I started getting these emails about people are interested in your article. And so, usually I think, of just a few people read your article. And right now it's up to over 1,402 people have now read this article. So I was like, wow, I never expected that I'd have that many people read one of my research papers. And it ends up being more of a historical perspective. So I was quite taken aback by that. But so because of this study, actually, I was able to help the Wisconsin National Guard prepare for the COVID-19 pandemic, because when this unfolded in March and we all had to we had 24 hours to get our stuff out of our office and start teaching online from our homes. It was just the weird thing that happened. And so the Wisconsin National Guard was called up to help with this. And I was actually able to help them prepare because I knew what happened in 1918. One of my former students was actually one of the top commanders, sergeants, and he said, my soldiers don't even know what a virus is, can you help me with this? And so I prepared several presentations that they could use to help train the guard members. So anyway, just a quick thing about the 1918 flu. It was caused by a highly pathogenic strain of influenza A virus. Mode of transmission was likely the same that we have with COVID-19, not just droplet. It was probably airborne, which means that even if you're up to 27 feet away, that's a potential for you to become infected. But at this time, people didn't really know what viruses were like. I mean, they knew there were small entities that could go through filters that would normally trap bacteria, but we had never visualized viruses. We didn't have an electron microscope. Whenever you have a pandemic, it's a novel strain. In other words, everyone is susceptible. There's no immunity to it, and so everyone can get sick. And this was a novel strain, and it infected the lungs. So this is going to be a difference compared to COVID-19, which can infect other organs. So that's what makes COVID-19 also very challenging compared to influenza A. Influenza A is very localized. It affects the lungs, the respiratory system. COVID-19 is much more complicated than that. What made this pandemic very unique, though, is that it killed very healthy people in the prime of their lives. 15 to 34-year-olds. It was more likely that they would die than the very young and the very old. Typically, we think of the very young and the very old dying. And in this case, it was, 15 to 34-year-olds. And the majority of people that died of secondary bacterial pneumonia infections, which is a complication. But also there was a subset of people that died very quickly within 5 days. And it was a massive hemorrhage. Their immune systems went into overdrive. It's called a cytokine storm reaction. And we see that something similar to that with COVID-19. And this just on the right is just kind of showing you what the virus looks like. It's a molecular package, and all viruses have sort of one protein on the outside, and that protein enables it to get inside of a cell and start to take over and making more copies of itself. With influenza A, the H protein is involved in that. So in this time period, there's no treatments. We don't have any antibiotics for secondary bacterial infections. We had students reading through the newspapers of 1918, which was the only form of communication. They had a morning paper and an evening paper. Maybe about 125 people out of, there were 30,000 people in this area had phones. So, telephones weren't very common either. But the newspaper was the best resource. And it turned out that cases were actually reported to the police department, who reported the case numbers to the newspaper. So that's how that was done. We saw all kinds of ads for snake oil remedies, even alcohol could help to prevent the flu, or at least help to reduce some of the symptoms of flu. Saw lots of ads for weird snake oil stuff, and Vicks Vapor Rub was like way back ordered. And one of my students did a pharmacy study. He found some pharmacy ledgers, and it turned out that we couldn't find ledgers from this county, but he did find some from another county. And this is actually out of the ledger book, where in October and November of 1918, this pharmacist had like a huge profit on that day. And my student was taken aback because he said, "Oh my God, there was blood on the ledger and there was a smiley face next to the profit that he had gained." And, it was just amazing. And most of the prescriptions were for controlled substances to deal with the pain. It was heroin, morphine, cocaine, and codeine. So, this is a very different time. We don't have antivirals. We don't have antibiotics. It's amazing that they could even in some ways grasp that there was this entity that was causing this disease. And so there were actually 3 waves of the flu. It's hard to find records of the actual, statistics in all these waves. As far as case numbers, they weren't very accurate. The record keeping wasn't as good as it is today, and we still have problems today because testing isn't, 100% in terms of how many people actually are getting tested. So, but sort of, it just seems like the pattern is that there were 3 waves. That it started in spring, and then the worst months again in the United States were October of 1918. That was the worst month, so October, November. And true estimates aren't going to totally be known, but they're guessing at least it killed 50 million people in the world, about 675,000 Americans, about 43,000 servicemen. Some suggest that it contributed to ending World War I. World War I's going on at the same time, but it's hard to know the true number of cases. And there's no vaccine, so I think eventually what happened is maybe herd immunity was reached in the United States. A little bit more on what was our response. And in Wisconsin, we were quite prepared, but and so were some other states, but then other states did not fare as well. But in general, overall, there was a nursing and doctor shortage because there was a war going on. So especially the men were drafted to go overseas and to fight the war. Many young healthcare people got sick and died. Public health experts were also ignored. So this is a similar kind of scenario that we saw at the beginning when it hit the United States here with COVID-19, where some of the government would play down, well, it's just a flu, and kind of play it down. And what happened eventually is that the war was coming to an end, and when it came to an end, we even had a bigger super spreader event because of the armistice. And before the armistice was signed, there was also a lot of war bond parades, and so that was another way to help spread the flu. So as far as the presses, they didn't always relay the information. And like I said, the only real information that was available was the newspaper. There wasn't, they didn't have Facebook or any of the technical things that we have today. But eventually, when they did start to implement restrictions, and all these restrictions happened at the county and the city level, whereas with COVID-19, they're happening at the county and the state level. The cities did close down. A lot of cities did lock down. Some, it's not every city, and I could go through, that would be like another talk because there's so many different cities, but what happened with the lockdown is schools would be closed, libraries would be closed, churches were closed, but the war industrial plants were not closed. And a lot of the men were gone at war. And so women were working at these industrial plants. I show, for example, this is a woman at a plant in Pennsylvania working on, it's called milling primers. I'm not really sure what that is, but it has to do with making munitions. But they were required to go to work even though some did not show up. They had some restrictions on bars and restaurants. Either they closed them or they had curfews. I know in Oshkosh, for example, they had curfews. They did not close the bars, but a local city, Neenah, they did close the bars. They didn't have large gatherings for the preseason baseball. They wore masks, and they did actually get into making masks and wearing masks. They enforced the no spitting ordinance. Interestingly, they built they turned like homes into emergency hospitals, so that if people had needed some other help from some other sickness, they went to the regular hospital. But anybody that had flu in this Oshkosh area, they were actually put in a horse-drawn ambulance and taken to the emergency hospital. So emergency hospitals were quite useful, and they were set up in this time period. They also, colleges held classes outdoors. We went to online classes, and I even know, even now with COVID-19, there were some schools that have been trying to do more outdoor teaching, especially in the fall. And they were learning more about ventilation and hand hygiene, and not shaking hands. In fact, this is the first article that came out in the Oshkosh area where they said quit shaking hands because of this contagious spread. Keep them clean and away from your mouth. Get plenty of fresh air day and night. So they were aware of hand hygiene. They were aware of ventilation, and we're doing some of the same things with COVID-19. We're closing libraries, we're closing churches, we're closing schools, all of that. Other restriction challenges, well, we still had challenges as far as, they tried to quarantine the soldiers in the army camps, because there were a lot of soldiers in the camps that had not left yet for Europe. And a lot of the soldiers just decided to go home. The economy was hit hard, like it's been hit here. And there was some misinformation. I thought this one was quite interesting. And there were not that many phones, but they had this weird information that if you talked on the telephone, it would spread the virus through the mouthpiece. And you could see there's a woman there sitting there with a mask, and that the virus could get through the phone wires. I thought that was kind of interesting. And then also they had invented a flu mask where they modified it so that you could still smoke. And they even had a cigarette that they thought could disinfect your air passages and you wouldn't get 1918 flu. So those were kind of some of the interesting bits that I didn't know. And just like today, there were resistance. There were protests. People got sick of being closed down, and in this area, schools were closed for 2 months. It's almost a little longer than what happened here. There was an election. Excuse me, I'm getting a little hoarse. I don't know why, but there was an election going on, and the voter turnout was actually quite low. And the biggest problem was communicating, because a lot of the officials wanted to downplay it. They wanted to keep the economy going. Same issues. They wanted people to wear masks, but there was a group called the Sanitary Spartacans. This was the largest anti-mask group, and they were out of San Francisco. They believed that their civil liberties were being violated if they were forced to, wear a mask and all of that. And people called them mask slackers, and it turned out you could actually get jail time if you didn't wear a mask. So you can see that there's some very amazing similarities between what happened in 1918 compared to what's going on with COVID-19. There was also Warren Harding was running for Senate, and his campaign strategy was America First. And he wanted to reopen. He wanted to return to normalcy. And that has gone on a lot also in the United States, is loosening restrictions. Right now, I think a lot of the restrictions are being loosened too fast. And we need to do it more slowly. This is just to show, and this is how, when we first started handling this COVID-19 pandemic, everybody was talking about we need to flatten the curve. And part of that had to do with we didn't have enough PPE for our healthcare. We need to flatten the curve so that we could catch up and get more PPE, get our hospitals ready, get enough people for testing, get enough people for contact tracing and all of that. So that's, they also did the same thing where they did this, tried to flatten the curve by, closing things down to hopefully get less cases. And so what happens here, it turns out that St. Louis did a very good job. As soon as the cases started occurring in St. Louis, right away they just shut down. They just locked down. They shut down schools, playgrounds, public gatherings of more than 20 people. Philadelphia did not. They actually had a big war bond parade, and 3 days later, 31 hospitals filled up with people sick with the flu. And you can, if my mouse works here, you can see, this is the Philadelphia, the typical epidemic curve. But if you look at St. Louis, the curve was flattened. And then we have another curve I wanted to point out was Denver. Denver had their first case, just before beginning of October. They started the restrictions pretty quickly. But then as early as it was about November 11th-ish. At the same time, I noticed this is the same time that the armistice was signed, and they removed their restrictions. Well, I don't know if you're aware of this, but when the armistice was signed, people were so excited. The newspaper was very interesting to read because they had nightshirt parades. People forgot about the flu. Anyway, in this area, they all got out, and it was just another big wave of the flu. And the same thing happened here, where they ended up with sort of this bimodal curve where people came out and they had this big super spread event with all these giant parades that were held because of the armistice was signed. So the signing of the armistice is, to me, is correlated, I think, with this super spreader event with all the parades that went on. Let's see, but what did we learn? Basically, we learned, the best way to deal with this pandemic is after you do your lockdowns, you got to do strict lockdown measures, wear your mask. Then the reopening should be gradual. It should be layered. Follow the advice of the public health experts, which they were not followed, especially at the beginning of this pandemic. Officials kept minimizing the effects of the flu. Most Americans, it was hard for them to be informed because the communication wasn't the same as what we have today. They have the newspaper. Many of them distrusted the government, and reopening was definitely too fast. And when the time came and they finally were able to open, I just thought it was interesting. The library had this article, and they said now all the books that you ever checked out, they're due, and they had to fumigate all the books that were returned and all the books in the library. So they used like a formalin gas and fumigated every book in order to get back to normal. And 100 years later, we have the next pandemic, which is quite amazing. It's a 100-year event. And we have a very different pathogen. Many of us as virologists, we expected that it was going to be another, like an avian strain of influenza A virus or a swine strain. Dr. Michael Osterholm predicted it was going to be a coronavirus, and I was, that's why he's an epidemiologist. He really was thinking ahead, and he's written a book about it. But it ends up that this next pathogen that causes a pandemic is a coronavirus, and it took some time. We had to gather more information. It wasn't transparent from the beginning that it could spread through an airborne route. It was droplet, but we didn't know for sure that it was actually spreading by an airborne route. And we know now today that it can do that. And it can be spread by talking, singing. There's been outbreaks, especially individuals in church choirs practicing, sneezing, coughing, spitting, but just breathing air in and out. If you are infected, you're breathing in, you're breathing out, viruses can be coming out. And about 40% of the people today are asymptomatic. They can be infected and asymptomatic, and they can still be spreading virus, which is why it's so important for people to continue to wear masks. The technology is better. Now we have an electron microscope. We can see the virus. We can sequence the genome of the virus. We can make a vaccine much more quickly. And I forgot to mention, with the 1918 flu, Mayo Clinic did produce some serum and a vaccine, but I'm sure that it didn't help, because I'm pretty sure that the vaccine was made against a bacterium. We just didn't know enough at the time. But today we have the technology that, we have been able to make more than two effective vaccines in a pretty short amount of time, which is quite amazing. And this I really want to point out is that SARS coronavirus 2, which is the cause of this pandemic, it invades more than the lungs, that it involves other systems. And so this is a much more complicated type of infection. And again, just a quick reminder, it's a novel strain, everybody's susceptible. So I found this quick paper on this virus, and this is why I tell my students that, you know, you don't want to get infected with this virus, because it not only infects the lungs, it affects the cardiovascular system. And if you look at this figure, wherever it's darker in color, like the upper airways, the mouth, the lungs, the gastrointestinal tract, even the urinary tract, those are areas where they've been able to detect virus, or at least virus parts. But they've also been able to detect parts in the reproductive tracts of males and females, in the brain, in the eye. You know, some people do get pink eye. Some people also lose their sense of taste and smell, because the virus has gone into the brain, and likely that's through the olfactory nerve. It can also, they found detected some virus in the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. So it's a very complicated virus. It's not just in the lungs, it's not localized, and it can cause more problems. But we were taken aback, because all we knew about coronaviruses were that most of them caused mild disease. So we knew back in like 1965 that some children every now and then would get a mild common cold, and somebody had finally discovered that it wasn't a rhinovirus, that it was a coronavirus back in the 60s. And then we had the SARS coronavirus 1 strain, which occurred back in 2003. But, you know, it didn't spread well person to person, and, you know, scientists were working on it, but, you know, we were just kind of taken aback that, you know, it would just be, you know, 15, 16 years later that there would be another coronavirus strain, but it would spread well and highly efficiently person to person. All the coronaviruses actually, they replicate in a primary host, which is usually a bat, or it could be a rodent. And then they go through another host, a different animal, before they actually go into humans. So it's a zoonotic type of disease. And all of our new viruses we're finding today that are spread to humans usually are coming from animals. So zoonotic viruses are what we really need to be watching for future pandemics and epidemics. So it turns out that this highly pathogenic SARS coronavirus 2, because it is a relative of SARS coronavirus 1, we're still not 100% sure. You know, we know that it's probably the main reservoir is bats, and then we're still, you know, having some questions about, you know, what is the second host it goes through before it goes into humans. And, you know, I could spend, you know, probably 10 or 15 minutes more talking about that, but I'd rather just move on to something else. But the bottom line is there are highly pathogenic coronaviruses, and they can cause, you know, acute respiratory syndrome and pneumonia and death, where we have the less pathogenic coronaviruses that cause the common cold. So we were kind of taken aback that the next pandemic was going to be caused by a highly pathogenic coronavirus, and let alone it's one that can infect so many different systems in your body, and you know, people are quite vulnerable. And it turned out the risk factors. So this one is different from 1918 flu. 1918 flu was affecting very healthy people. With COVID-19, it's the elderly. It's that are highly affected. It's more than 80% of the individuals that die of COVID-19 are over the age of 65, and they have pre-existing conditions like high blood pressure, heart disease, kidney disease, diabetes, obesity, lung problems, COPD, or even people with cystic fibrosis have issues. Or, you know, some people are on immune suppressive drugs in order to prevent organ rejection, or to handle autoimmune disorders. There's cancer patients, they're very susceptible. And they have also found, and we had to learn about this virus because we didn't know coronaviruses could do this. We had to learn more about them. And one thing that they learned was people also, if they are low in vitamin D, they are highly likely to develop a severe case. And it turned out they learned this by a lot of the cases that they had in the hospitals. A lot of the patients they were treating were low in vitamin D levels. And that seems to play a role in whether or not you have a severe or mild illness. Also, the numbers of viruses that you inhale have an effect on whether or not you're going to have a severe or mild illness. So if you have a higher viral load, in other words, you inhaled more viruses, you will have a more severe disease as if you didn't. So if you wear a mask, masks aren't, excuse me, they aren't 100% efficient, especially a cloth mask, not real tight fitting. You know, maybe it's 70% efficient compared to, say, an N95 mask, which is 95% efficient. So with a 70% efficient mask, you can still inhale some viruses and have a low level of infection. And that's why there are some people walking around with, you know, they're asymptomatic, but they have been infected because they have had so few viruses that they've been infected with, but enough for them to be an asymptomatic carrier, and they're shedding virus for a certain amount of time. And again, symptoms of coronavirus, you know, is obviously they tell you to please go to get treatment if you feel short of breath. Obviously, you should be tested as well. Fever, muscle aches, vomiting, diarrhea. Some people lose their sense of taste and smell. Also, some people get a rash. Some people get pink eye. So, you know, these are just some of the general symptoms, but sometimes there's always a little bit other symptoms that are not always listed on the typical case definition. And there are some people, now they're saying it's about maybe 10%, according to one study, of people are long haulers, or they continue to have symptoms even 4 weeks after they have been infected and, you know, should be recovered. And these symptoms can vary. Some people even have symptoms for, you know, as long as 3 months or more. But the symptoms tend to be fatigue, brain fog, you know, headache, loss of smell or taste, or even having a different smell. One of my lab instructors, she kept having this burning smell for longer than 3 or 4 months after she had COVID-19. And once she had her first dose of COVID-19 vaccine, 2 weeks later, the smell went away, which they're finding that as well, is that vaccinating may help with the long haulers. We still need to see studies to come out, but I was pretty excited that, you know, she no longer had to deal with this weird smell that she was smelling. Heart palpitations, chest pain, shortness of breath is a big one. People that are have these symptoms for a longer period of time, often these are people that have whenever they do physical exercise, they feel much more fatigued and tired. It just wears them out. So there's also depression, anxiety, fever. So these are just some of the symptoms that linger on much more longer than you would expect. And some of these symptoms can linger on for other infectious diseases like influenza too, but it's not as long as what's happening with coronavirus, SARS coronavirus 2. And SARS coronavirus 2 there's just so much we're still learning about this virus. So just a quick thing on the epidemiology, quick thing on world stats. So this is where we're at today or yesterday, over 144,430 some cases, over 3 million deaths, and this is at a world time period. And again, the first variants started to show up in September, and you can see that now cases seem to really be going up. Maybe it's coinciding with restrictions being loosened as well. And so we're seeing cases are continuing to increase. And this is looking at the US. And again, I still predict it just depends on you know, how everything goes with vaccination, but I still predict we're going to have, and we are having surges in some states, but where we're at is about 32 1,600,000 some cases and over 583,000 deaths to date. So that's where we're at. Right now, the variants are dominating, especially the B.1.1.7 variant, and I think the Brazilian variant is in some places, and there's the South African variant as well. But the main one is the B.1.1.7, and that one is highly contagious, and it seems to be more pathogenic in younger people. So anyway, just a quick timeline of the COVID-19 response, where epidemiologist Dr. Osterholm, he started to notice that this was happening back in China. It was like December 15th or so. There was a cluster of cases in the of people with pneumonia in a Wuhan hospital, and it took some time before we actually started doing more about it. But Dr. Osterholm had, notified the president that there could be a pandemic on our hands. And his first warning was January 20th, and then the second warning was February 3rd. And at this time, the president's campaigning and is downplaying it, just like what happened in 1918. No big surprise, but we are not ready. Our stockpile of PPE, had been diminished. We had been helping with an Ebola break not that many years before, and our whole pandemic response team was disbanded. There was a big hiring freeze at the CDC. We just weren't ready for the situation. We didn't have enough ventilators, not enough PPE, not enough stockpile of antibiotics. And the big concern is that the epicenter is China, and they make so many of our key acute critical drugs. These are drugs that if people don't take them every day, they will die. And they are the main producers of these drugs. In Wuhan, China, they went under lockdown on January 20th. So nobody's going to be working and making these medicines. So that was a major concern. They also make breast and lung cancer medications, vancomycin, a very important antibiotic, heparin, a very important blood thinner. So, Dr. Osterholm was quite, concerned about what are we going to do? We don't have these things. We could have people dying, not of COVID, but because they're not getting their medications. So it took some time. Our public health experts were ignored. This same thing happened in 1918. There was some lack of transparency. It wasn't clear that this virus could be spread through airborne transmission. The frontline workers had to learn hard, and they had to learn fast. And that's how they picked up on things like people that are deficient in vitamin D seem to, have a severe case where they can end up on a ventilator. But we did figure out through what was happening in China and their experience and how they handle it is the best thing that we could do is to try to isolate the sickest people as fast as possible. And to do that, you also need to do testing, and you need to do contact tracing. And so it took us a little bit of time to get all of our testing going, because our first kits had some issues, we were just like behind in everything at the beginning. And I just wanted to point out that these are two very important experts. Like I tell my students, if you see these two individuals and they pop up on the television, pay attention. Dr. Fauci, he just turned 80 years old. He's director of the National Institutes of Allergies and Infectious Diseases at the NIH. He's an advisor to about 8 different presidents. I was at NIH. I used to see him run every day at noon, because I would run with other postdocs at noon as well. I mean, he's just a good person. His goal is to keep people healthy, make vaccines, do what we need to do to combat viral and other types of pathogens. Dr. Osterholm is an epidemiologist. He's director of CIDRAP, which is the Center for Infectious Disease Policies and Research. He's at the University of Minnesota. He was also an advisor for Biden's transition team. So these are two experts that, kind of I grew up with, because I grew up in Minnesota, but there's many other experts out there, and, there's many other experts a lot of the scientists are being ignored, in this year. This has been a hard year to be in science. It's been strange, even myself, where, and I, right now with the University of Oshkosh, the leader of the COVID response team is the chief of police of the university, and I'm not on the committee for the response team. So a lot of this has to do with political or financial interests. So anyway, but our stay-at-home orders, across the United States started occurring in March. There were 9 states that had stay-at-home orders by March 23rd. Wisconsin was one of them. K through 12, college schools were being closed, and we had gone to online instruction. And this was a big shock for some of my colleagues who don't use the computer very much at all. For myself, it wasn't a big shock. I'm more techie. But what I did was the first 3 days, I just made all these PowerPoints on this is how you create a quiz in Canvas. This is how you set up a discussion. This is how you do all these different things, because I felt bad for probably only 2 of us in the department of about 20 knew how to do online courses. Non-essential businesses were closed. Public gatherings were banned. There were curfews, and the restaurants were pretty much closed except for takeout. Travel regulations, and we began to set up testing and contact tracing, and we needed people to do that. That was another thing, is we needed manpower, and that's where in Wisconsin, the National Guards, they were involved in heavily in one of the testing centers that we have here. They're also involved in the vaccination thing as well. I just thought this was kind of interesting, because in 1918 they even had articles, "Don't shake hands," and this came out too, as well as the different ways that you can avoid handshaking. I thought it was kind of interesting. And then this is just coming into what was that like in March. And all of us have our own experiences. These are biased because they're mine. But the reason why I walked around to take pictures was because in 1918, there were very few photographs. I was searching and searching. Yeah, there were cameras, but there just wasn't a good record. And so I wanted to make sure that we had a record of this. So I just would drive around town and show that, they didn't want people in the playgrounds, that schools were closed, that, businesses were closed, all these signs. It just seemed quite surreal. Oh yeah, you go to the store, and what do we run out of? Hand sanitizer and toilet paper. And there's a lot of memes, and there's a lot of creativity with a lot of different musical parodies that I thought were fun and interesting. And at least it helps us to tolerate a difficult situation, as if you can laugh at it, or if you can find at least some humor in it at the same time while you're dealing with the seriousness of it. So grocery shopping, was really interesting. And the masks, I just took these. I would get up, the store would open at 5 o'clock, and I would go there right away, because there's going to be less viruses hanging in the air, because when these viruses are airborne, and I should have made this much more clear, is they're not on the floor. If somebody's coughing out, these viruses can hang in the air for about 3 hours, at least 3 to 4 hours. And so if somebody just walks ahead of you, and then you walk into where they were breathing, their airstream, you can breathe in some of their viruses if they're not wearing a mask. And so I would go there early, because I'm like, well, I'm going to get into the store before it fills up with viruses in the air. So I would go very early, and other people were doing the same thing, as you can see. And even some people were wearing overalls, and it was you can see a Packer interesting mask there. I just thought it was kind of interesting. Due to high demand, you can only have one thing of toilet paper. Was this due to COVID-19? We are discouraging the use of reusable bags. If you'd like to use your own bag, we ask that you bring your own bag. Yeah, and you had to bag your own groceries. Things that were low on were, toilet paper. Meat disappeared here. Soups disappeared. Pizza was the big one. Frozen pizza disappeared here. And then I'd love to see this, because our healthcare workers were working so hard. I teach, one of the classes I teach is almost all pre-nursing students. I had over 140 of them in when this was going on, and they're CNAs, and some of them also work in clinics and hospitals, and they were doing, lots of hours, and it was good for to see that, we were appreciating the frontline workers. All the social distancing signs are going up. And then we have, if unless you're an essential worker, you can't work. So the unemployment's a problem. The economy's having issues. We had to pass a coronavirus relief act in order to get some help and some stimulus. We didn't have enough hand sanitizer, so some of the distilleries were starting to make hand sanitizer. One thing I just want to note here, there was even a spike in accidental poisonings after former President Trump mentioned that maybe injecting yourself with disinfectant may be a way to cleanse yourself or treat COVID-19. You can see in the months of March and April, the numbers of poison calls to poison control centers went up, both disinfectant and bleach. And Lysol had to put out something to say, please do not use it to treat COVID-19. Certain hotspots occurred in the United States, from nursing homes to meat packing plants. People worked closely together and they weren't masking at the beginning. Prisons, correctional institutes, where you have a lot of gatherings of people. And at the beginning, there were still some funerals, choir practices that ended up being super spreading events. And it wasn't until July 14th that the CDC recommended that we wear masks. So that should have been done much earlier. I think part of the reason why it wasn't was because we were short of PPE, but there could have been, more about making your own mask or something, because I think that might have helped us reduce some cases if that had gotten out a little bit sooner than July. The administration developed the Operation Warp Speed to start working on a vaccine, which is great, because we have right now 2 very effective vaccines, the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines, and there's others. J&J is in a pause, but they're supposed to make a decision about that tomorrow to see if we will continue using that, maybe for specific age groups, or define exactly who could still get that one, since there have been issues with it. And there were issues about data. We're trying to follow this, and things got rather messy. The New York Times was having its own dashboard to help us learn, how many cases there are, how many deaths there are. Johns Hopkins was involved. So if I'm just in a hurry to grab numbers, I'll go to Worldometer. But states all have their dashboards. Counties have their dashboards of statistics. Hospitals, are reporting their information. Colleges have their own dashboards of students getting sick. So, there's so much data out there. But one of the things that did happen is that normally hospitals were reporting their information to the CDC, and the president directed that it be sent to Human Health Services first. And that became a real problem. And by the middle of August, it happened for a month, and by the middle of August, it went back to the CDC. So that was kind of a problem in just handling the data. And so our main thing we learned is, you can't remove restrictions too fast. We should be layering it. But people were tired. They were tired of being in a lockdown. There were protests, and protests also did occur in 1918, but there were political rallies, there were protests, there were super spreading events that occurred. People still had weddings. College campuses were reopening. Some didn't, some did, some went totally online. UW Oshkosh has been open face to face this whole time, but it's not, it's just like labs typically. Like, for example, I could not teach my lecture face-to-face because I have about 140 and we can't social distance, and our pits aren't big enough for social distancing. So I had to teach online, and then I chose to teach virtual labs instead of face-to-face so that the majors could have more space to do social distancing for their labs. So we had to make some compromises in that way. K through 12, as well as some states, they had online learning only, and then there were some states where they had more face-to-face. So, you know, again, it's being left up to local level decisions. And so it's not, it makes it complicated when everything is local level decisions. So let's see. Oh, and back in October, and that's when we ended up having another humongous surge in the United States. President Trump also got COVID-19, and he was treated with a number of different things. He was treated with probably the monoclonal antibodies. The Regeneron helped him a lot. He had oxygen therapy. He had remdesivir, which is a repurposed experimental drug. He was given a steroid, which was helping patients in the UK. They discovered that dexamethasone was helping the severe patients to be able to get off of ventilators. He was also being given zinc, vitamin D, and some other medications. But that was a game changer, as well as I think some people now realize that you know, this virus is real. The president can get it as well. And again, Wisconsin had a major problem here, and I just we were like the hot spot in the nation in October, and boy, all my students were working 30, 40 hours a week. I was extending exam dates for them because they were working so hard. You know, as CNAs, some of them got COVID-19 themselves. And I just found this meme. I thought it was kind of funny that it was so bad here. I just said, you know, I probably need to autoclave myself. It was just a really weird time. And here we are. This is what our curve is starting to look like. You know, the United States ends up being #1 as far as the most cases and the most deaths, and this is by about February or so of 2021. Oh, even before that, the United States went up really high. But this is actually kind of just showing what our curve looks like. What other things that we did learn? You know, like I said, we had to learn hard, learn fast. We've been trying to do clinical trials by repurposing drugs. There are a few antivirals that look promising, but also there's some anti-inflammatory drugs that seem to be promising. Steroids, immunotherapy seems to be probably the most promising, using monoclonal antibodies to neutralize the virus. But at the same time, variants probably aren't going to respond to those monoclonal antibodies. So that's with the variants right now, these treatments aren't going to be working very well, and possibly even vitamins to help. And, you know, also, you know, when we're dealing with this pandemic, we can learn from other countries. And it just seemed like, as I was doing my classes, I was also teaching about what's going on in other countries, what's working, what's not working. We got to be collaborative and help each other and learn from each other. And basically, we learned that, you know, leadership is very important. You know, following the public health experts and the science is a way to reduce the numbers of cases and deaths. Responding rapidly, doing a lockdown as fast as you can. Australia showed they did a long lockdown, but they really have their numbers down. Strict lockdowns work, testing works, isolating the infected people, wearing a mask, those things all work. But the problems we've had is again, like 1918, distrusting the government, reopening too fast. You know, we got to wear our masks. And now February 10th, the CDC actually recommended that we wear tighter fitting masks, or possibly even doubling the mass in order to be more efficient. And I did want to mention one quick thing about masking. And, you know, there's resistance to wearing masks. There's protests about wearing masks. And there's a study that came out about tight versus looser cultures. And that when you're in a tight culture where the citizens respond to what they need to do. If the government says you got to wear a mask, they will respond to it because otherwise they're punished. They will respond to a pandemic much better than a loose culture like the United States, where people kind of defy it. I don't want to wear a mask. It's going to violate my rights as a person or something like that. So we kind of have a loose culture. And in times of a pandemic, we really need to learn how to be a tighter culture during tough times like this pandemic. And there's actually someone that's written a book about this as well. I just couldn't remember off the top of my head the author. My bad. So what do we need to do to get this to end is we can't wait for herd immunity. I mean, that's been a strategy by the UK initially. I think it was Sweden as well. It's just not going to work. There's just too many high-risk people. And herd immunity is when your population reaches the amount of immunity where the disease stops spreading. And you can create that in two ways. Either you let everybody get sick or use a vaccine to prevent the spread of disease, but people are immune then to infections. And so that's the best strategy, is to actually vaccinate. Our vaccine rollout, I had a rough start, right away. We finally have 2 good vaccines available, but, the states were given vaccine, but we didn't have the people to actually administer the vaccines because the people were so busy doing contact tracing, taking care of patients. And so, we had to come up with ways to get enough people to administer vaccines and also at the same time keep on testing. So we had a rough start, but we're doing quite well right now. In fact, I grabbed this from the CDC this morning, and we are to the point now where 26.4% of the total population is fully vaccinated, and about 40% of the U.S. population has had at least 1 dose. So we're making some progress in that. But even if the United States, we keep plugging away, we do a really good job with vaccination, all countries need to work on vaccination. So we're going to have to buy vaccine for countries that need it and help them get it administered for this pandemic to totally end. One of the problems is vaccine hesitancy. And there is actually a group of people, they're journalists, veteran journalists, they're grouped together where they will look around the internet to look to see where there is misinformation that's misguiding people, and it's getting out into social media and creating vaccine hesitancy. They actually, by doing this, by tracking this, it's called NewsGuard, they have discovered there's about 12 people that are responsible for the vast majority of disinformation that's out there. They're called the Disinformation Dozen, and they're posting mostly to Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. And they're posting a lot of myths and things that are just way out there, and that's causing the vaccine hesitancy. And these are I grabbed this morning. There's 29 myths, and I just wanted to go through a couple of them because I have students messaging me saying, "Oh, I'm afraid to get the vaccine because of this or that." And one of them is that they've messaged me about is that the mRNA vaccines can alter your DNA, and that's not true. Another one is that there's a microchip technology created by Bill Gates's research through this COVID vaccine, or that the head of Pfizer has put in some sync-in protein that's going to make females sterile. I mean, none of this is true, and again, people that are not well educated or, science literate, they're not going to know, they're any better. And so we have to get the right information out there. Here's another one, more recent one. I didn't see this one a couple of weeks ago. This is a newer one. The COVID-19 vaccine can cause people to develop COVID-19. They can't. These vaccines are safe. They are parts of a virus. They are not the whole virus. They can never, ever cause COVID-19. There's another one about it's just a broad one, that mRNA, because it's an mRNA vaccine, mRNA inactivates tumor suppressing proteins and therefore can end up causing cancer. No, I mean, it's just taking a very broad idea and turning it into something that's not going to happen. And then they talk about PCR tests used to detect the virus that causes COVID-19. It can also be used to secretly deliver COVID-19 vaccine, according to, I just don't know how they come up with some of these, but there's 29 of these myths that just aren't true. And if you go to this website, this NewsGuard website, it will show you, this is what this is about, and it does not do what this statement says. And as many of you know, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is only a one-dose vaccine, but works very well, was paused, because there were 7 people that had severe reactions. They had a blood clot type of reaction that was very, very severe. And these are all people that also had low platelets. And, this is a 1 in a million side effect, but it's concerning. And so it was good that the FDA and, everybody decided that, hey, we're going to pause this until we figure out exactly what's going on with this. Maybe we can redefine who gets this vaccine, because all of these were females. It may just be a certain age range of females that this is a more likely thing to happen with. But again, it is very, very rare, but it does show you that we want our vaccines to be safe and that no one should have a side effect like this. So this is in a pause, and they're going to meet tomorrow to figure out what to do about it. But one thing that should give people confidence, even with vaccine hesitancy, is here we have Dr. Fauci getting vaccinated in front of the American people. And they actually did this with like the polio vaccine, where movie stars, important people, people would recognize, were vaccinated in front of others to show that, hey, this is safe, this is an important thing to do. So, President Biden, several different people were able to show that, hey, I'm getting my vaccine right now, it's okay. But there still is this vaccine hesitancy by certain groups. This is where we're at today. There are still hot spots. We're getting some surges. The B117 variant is really starting to dominate. It's changing now because more of the older generations are vaccinated. So this is now, the surge is involving children, teens, young adults, and parents of kids that are in K through 12 schools. That is now the group that is getting COVID-19. And some of the big hotspots are, like Maine, there's Michigan, there's Florida, Washington, Oregon. You can see, pretty big hot spots just all along the East Coast area, but then there's some other hot spots. And so what are some of the factors? Again, it's loosening restrictions too fast as well. One thing that's driving cases in Minnesota, I know, is high school sports. In fact, some parents are actually moving to South Dakota, where there are less restrictions, so that their children can play in high school sports. And they don't get tested, they get sick, they don't have to report it. And it's just, it's spreading. But unfortunately, some of the younger people now are getting sicker because the variant is a bit different than the original strain that was here. And so it's affecting people more. It's more virulent, especially in some of these younger people. And then my last world situation I wanted to mention was India today. I don't know how much everybody's been watching India, but they have a second big wave of COVID-19 cases right now. They broke the record today. In one day, they had 835 COVID-19 cases. They've been very lax with restrictions in daily lives. They've not been wearing masks. They've been reopening too fast. The variants are there. There are children under the age of 15 with some very severe cases. There's been super spreading events. Most of it's related to religious festivals. They're short of vaccine. They've run out of oxygen at many hospitals. They've run out of supplies. Crematoriums are overwhelmed. It's kind of a dire situation if you Google it and see what's going on. And I can't see it because of my the way my sharing is set up, but you can see that right now it's just spiking number of cases right now. And I think that this is my last, just a very, very short summary. We need to follow the science, follow public health experts, don't ease our restrictions too quickly. We need to use layered approaches. Don't be complacent, keep wearing your mask, follow the CDC guidelines. If it's okay to not wear masks outside, that's fine. But if you're indoors and not in a social distancing situation, you definitely want to keep wearing your masks. We need all countries to be vaccinated. To me, it's a public health problem. It's not a political problem. It shouldn't be a political problem. And this is a quote that Dr. Fauci did way before this happened. This was back in the day when we were worried about influenza and bird flu, even before the first SARS pandemic. He said, "What is one nation's problem is every nation's problem." And I do believe that that's the case. And that's where we're at now, is even if we get through this with the vaccine, we're gonna normalize, but we have to help other nations as well for this to totally get better. And that is it for my presentation. I have some resources that I'm going to add to that list a little bit, just to make sure that if anyone's interested, part of the problem has been, what resources to go to. So with that, this is the end of my webinar. Hopefully I didn't go over time.
We're a little bit over time, but for the folks who are still on the call, that's okay. There were a few questions in the chat, so if we have some time to answer those, and then again, everyone will get the recording. So, if you didn't get your question answered, just be sure to watch the recording and you'll see it there. So first question was, when was the use of masks, or when did that become a known protective practice? They were wondering if that came about as a result of the 1918 pandemic, or if that was around beforehand.
Well, I think we knew it from the 1918 flu. The reason why it wasn't encouraged right away at the beginning in the United States is because we were so short of PPE, and so we held back on that. And we should have done that much earlier. But and more and more studies were done because people were concerned, does this really do anything? It's a virus, it's so small, it can go right through it. But they've done lots of studies now to show that, which masks are the best. Are they surgical masks? Are they N95s? Are they just kind of wearing a cloth mask? And they prove that all of these do have some effectiveness. So, 1918, it worked. It's just we knew about it. And we also weren't aware that this virus was airborne. We thought it was droplet, but not airborne. So, we had to learn. And that's one of the hard things about this pandemic is we had to learn as we went.
Yeah. Another question, when you were talking about vitamin D, is it just severe cases or increased susceptibility, or both?
It's correlated with severe illness. And unfortunately, most people don't have enough vitamin D. We don't get enough. Some of it we get from sun, and a lot of us don't have enough vitamin D. In fact, Dr. Fauci is taking, I forget how many units, but he's taking vitamin D supplements as well, especially in the wintertime. We don't get enough sun. But they found that very severe cases, they all were deficient in vitamin D. But that doesn't mean if you take vitamin D, it's going to prevent infection or any of that. But it's one of the risk factors. But usually people have other risk factors as well, because if they already are severely ill, they also have the other heart disease and other problems.
And then another question, it says, my vaccination record says it expires in 6 months. Are we going to get a booster in another 6-month period?
That's a great question. I believe we probably will I'm predicting probably by January. I think the vaccine that we have right now will last longer than 6 months. It only is being said that it lasts for 6 months because that's how far we've gone out with the vaccine. Once we go out 8 months, then they'll say it's good for 8 months. Once we go out 9 months, it'll be for 9 months. But as we get more variants, we're going to need a booster probably for the variants. It's going to be like influenza. You get your influenza shot every year. This is going to be very similar for a while anyway.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And one last question is, what is the best type of masks to use?
Best type of mask? Well, if you can get an N95 or, surgical mask, the tight fit. That's the bottom line. Wear 2 masks, but you have to get it so if you blow, you don't feel any air coming out. Because if you feel air when you're blowing in your mask coming out the sides, it's not tight enough. You need something that's tight, that doesn't have any loose connections. And a cloth mask, like a double cloth mask or just a cloth mask, as long as it's tight, if you can make them that you have the little wire over the nose and you can make them tight enough, that's really all you need. You don't necessarily need an N95, just something tight fitting would be the best.
That sounds good. So it sounds like best mask is the mask that fits.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's all the questions that I saw in the chat. And again, we are a little bit over time. So thank you for everyone who stuck around. Thank you for everyone who joined us earlier. Thank you so much, Dr. Shores, for giving this presentation. This was wonderful. And again, everyone will be receiving the recording, the slides, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. So,
all right, well, thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.